Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, hello, hello. We know that folks are populating, folks are joining, folks are coming on in. We are so grateful for all of you who are joining us on this lovely Tuesday evening, who are rocking with us for our second mutual aid training. Welcome, welcome. We want to invite you to drop your name in the chat. Let us know where you're from. Let us know what brought you to this training tonight. Just drop it in. We want to know. We want to see who you are. Hey, Linda from Minneapolis. Come on, woman the lifeboat in Pittsburgh. Katie in Northern Virginia, welcome, welcome. Oh, the YouTube is popping. The people are here from YouTube. Welcome, Facebook friends. Are y'all here? Are y'all in the building? Where are you? Tell us where you're joining us from. Tell us what you're hoping to get from today. What brought you here today? We would love to know more. And while y'all are doing that, while y'all are telling me about you, let me tell you a little bit about me. So my name is Tamika Middleton, as you can see on the bottom of your screen. And I am the managing director at Women's March. Many of you who have been around, who have joined us for different kinds of programming, have seen me, have met me, have heard me cackle on your screens. If you come to a mobilization, you see me lose my voice. Very excited to be here with all of you as always. And I'm so grateful that you keep rocking with us. Shout out to Irene, who said, I'm already active, but I'm trying to do more. Welcome, Irene. Thank you for joining us just this evening. Folks are saying they want to connect. They want to learn more. Yes, they want to make, use, and give to mutual aid. I love that. You want to join us because you want to attend political events and rallies. That's what brought you to this space. So welcome, welcome. While you all continue to drop in the chat what y'all are up to, I am going to start our presentation because I want to get into this so that we can do all the talking that needs to be talked. You can hear and learn all the things that need to be learned. So welcome again. This is training number 2. If you have not seen the previous training, you can find it on our Facebook page. You can also find it on our YouTube. If you go to the tab that says live or lives on our YouTube channel, you can see all the live streams that we do live there afterwards, including part 1 of this training. So I encourage you, please do that. It is the grounding for understanding what we are up to in this process. So let's get into it. Before we jump all the way in, we want to do a little tech and vibe check. Okay, first and foremost, this is being live streamed on our Facebook and on our YouTube. Live captions. If you need live captions, go over to the Women's March Facebook page. That's where you can find live captions while we are in this training. Unfortunately, YouTube does not currently have that capability. If you want to watch on YouTube, but you need captions, you will have to do that after the live ends. You can still watch the video after the live, and you will then be able to view it with the captions. So if you need captions, please go over to our Facebook. Continue throughout this. We want you to continue to drop your comments and your questions in the chat on whatever platform that you're on. And we're going to do our very best to touch on them throughout the course of the training. Of course, there's a lot to learn, a lot to know here. So if you don't get your questions answered, we will talk to you more about what's next and some ways that you might be able to continue to be in dialogue with us and get some questions answered and get some support. But tonight, go ahead, whatever platform you're watching on, drop your questions in the chat. They will show up for us. We will do our best to get to your questions and your comments. All follow-up resources and communications will be sent to those who have registered for the training. So if you went online, you registered for the training, you will be sent an email tomorrow that has the resources that we share here in addition to other resources. You will get the link to the video. You will get the slide deck from today. And any resources you hear us talk about, you will get it in an email afterwards. And then later, we will talk about more ways to continue to get more resources from us about mutual aid. And also finally, last thing, this is a vibe check question. This is a space where we are inviting folks to continuously be in with us and to be growing. We know a lot of folks are new to the content, and many of our folks who join us on Women's March calls are new to the movement, are new to political spaces. And so we want to invite you to be here and to enter. We also want to invite you to be intentional about how you are and how you show up in this space. There's space for growth and learning, but there is not space for disrespect. Okay. One of the organizations I used to work at is an organization called Project South. And one of our agreements whenever we came into a meeting was that oppression exists, but we challenge it here. And so in this space, we're going to do our best to challenge the misogyny, the racism, the transphobia, the homophobia, all those things that we have learned and we have gained because it's in the air of the society we live in. We are going to do our best to challenge that here. And when we see it show up, we are going to show up with love and intention for each other to lovingly correct. And if we see that the disrespect and the offense continues, one thing to know about us is that our block hand is strong. So the first time that we see it, you might get a loving correction. If it continues or if you spam the chat, your comments will be limited, and ultimately you'll be removed if you do not if you continue with that behavior. All right. So let's keep it pushing. This training is a part of a larger project called It's Giving Feminist Mutual Aid. And it is a bigger project where we are trying to build a network of feminist mutual aid projects. And this project is powered not just by Women's March, but by a constellation of amazing organizations. Many of you learned about many of them last week. You'll be continuing to learn about them. And also in your emails, we'll continue to share more information and more learning and resources about the organizations. I'm going to name them here. I won't spend too much time getting into them because I want to get into the meat of the thing. But the organizations that are powering this project are Women's March, Feed Durham, Building Movement Project, and the Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund, which is fiscally sponsored project of the Organization for Human Rights and Democracy. And our trainers today, there I am, once upon a time when my hair was much shorter. Also, Katina Parker, who is from Feed Durham. Adaku Uta joining us from Building Movement Project. And Carissa Vaughn joining us from Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund. When they jump on the screen, they will give you a little bit more about themselves. Hopefully you watched the first training and you know a little bit about them, but it's all good. You can continue to learn about us today. So tonight, our goals are to help you create initial steps and key goals for creating and launching a mutual aid project. This last week we grounded, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we did last week, but we grounded. This week we're acting, right? We're moving into action. And so this, when you walk away from here, you should be able to think about those key goals and those initial steps for creating and launching a mutual aid project. We'll clarify some of the logistics and safety protocols, the roles, the boundaries necessary for your project success, and we will identify some support and sustainability needs. So we're starting here, where we are right now, welcoming, grounding, an overview of our time. Then we'll get into building your project. Then we'll talk sustainability, safety, and boundaries. Then we'll get into common challenges and troubleshooting. And then finally, we'll land in reflections, next step, and then we'll close out. So a little bit of review from last time. Many of you hopefully were here. If you were here for the last training, drop that in the chat. Let us know. Say, I was here, raise your hand, whatever, however you want to signal that. But let us know if you joined us live last time. If you watched it afterwards, let us know. So we can have a baseline of where everybody is. And, hopefully folks have followed the instructions and viewed the video beforehand. So last time we got into what is mutual aid. We offered a few definitions. We offered this one from Miriam Kaba. If you follow us on our social media, you saw us repost this quote. Miriam Kaba said, mutual aid is a practice and politics that emphasizes solidarity rather than charity. What does that mean? It means we recognize that our well-being, health, and dignity are all bound up in each other. It means that we understand our survival depends on cooperation, not competition. I'm going to say that last line one more time, because mutual aid means that we understand that our survival depends on cooperation, not competition. Another offering is from Sadia Hartman, who is a phenomenal scholar. And she says that her offering is that collaboration, reciprocity, and shared creation define the practice of mutual aid. It was and remains a collective practice of survival for those bereft of the notion that life and land, human and earth, could be owned, traded, and made the private property of anyone. Those who would never be self-possessed or envision themselves as acquisitive, self-interested proprietors, or measure their life and worth by the ledger or the rent book, or long to be the settler or the master. Mutual aid did not traffic in the belief that the self existed distinct and apart from others, or revere the ideas of individuality and sovereignty as much as it did singularity and freedom. Again, our survival is bound up in cooperation, is bound up in each other. And we offered another definition from the zine that's called Ain't No PC Gonna Fix It, Baby. And that quote is, mutual aid is the idea that we all have a stake in one another's liberation, and that when we act from that interdependence, we can share with one another as equals. Charity, by contrast, is one-sided. One shares excess wealth on one's own terms. Ideologically, charity implies that others inherently need the help, that they are unable to take care of themselves. And if you watch that full video, if you haven't, please go back and do so. Adaku, one of our trainers, get very much into this question of solidarity versus charity, mutual aid versus charity, which is a very important pillar of being in and doing mutual aid work. And our final definition comes from our partner, Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund, which Mama Fund defines mutual aid as a reciprocal system where those that benefit are also feeding back in supporting others with either services, money, or other value-adding measures. So we also got a little bit into some of the founding policy or the foundational politics. We talked about mutual aid as being anti-fascist, right? As being key and fundamental to defeating fascism. We talked about mutual aid as being anti-capitalist, that it helps us to break, as some of these authors that we have pulled from so far for these definitions have named, that we are talking about how we break through a capitalist ideology that tells us that some people deserve to have more than others, that some people need to rely on other people for goods, that things, that the earth, that the land, that people can be owned and mass and be, servants and versus others being masters. Mutual aid is abolitionist. Mutual aid brings us and envisions a world where we have undone those things, the root causes of crime, the root causes of poverty, where we are actually addressing the needs of people and thereby building a world that does not rely on policings and prisons, etc., but that builds sustainable solutions for our communities. And also, mutual aid is feminist. Mutual aid is a practice that dismantles patriarchy and subjugation. And so we are in those things today. So with that, I am going to pass it to our loved one, Adaku, who is going to take us into the next section here.
Hey, comrades, welcome. I'm so grateful to get to be here learning alongside of you. My name is Adaku Uta. I use all pronouns. I am beaming to you from Lenni Lenape land, also known as Edgewater, New Jersey, by way of Lagos, Nigeria, where I was raised. And it's not a small thing to keep choosing each other in this time of chaos, crisis, and contradiction. So I thank you for your care, your commitment, and hopefully your consistency in building a world where we can all be more free. I'm also the senior manager of movement building programs at the Building Movement Project. We're a national nonprofit organization that supports how movements and social justice leaders and networks are able to build a just and equitable future through cultivating really insightful research, creating really practical tools and resources, and then also weaving transformative relationships that allow for us to coordinate and make change together. And so grateful to get to be in this circle with you all again. Welcome back to the folks who joined us 2 weeks ago, and welcome back to the new folks who are joining us today. So we're going to dive into, we've heard a little bit about what mutual aid is grounded in some of the frameworks that really guide our own praxis around mutual aid. And we're going to talk about what does it take to build a project, and what does it take to build a team. So real quick, I want to hear from you all, if you can drop into the chat. For those of you who are inside of, maybe you're inside of a mutual aid project right now, or you're inside of a project that involves a number of people who are moving towards a shared goal to create some kind of change. What are some of the ways that you figure out what roles that you need inside of the project that you're a part of? How do you do that? Some of you might be like, we don't figure anything out. We just kind of jump right into it and just build it as we go. And then I imagine some of you might be really thoughtful, like Corinne is saying down here, about doing some level of community mapping. Like we talked about last time, Corinne, I wonder if you were here last 2 weeks ago, where we map the community to see what do we have, what do we need. Lauren, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, talked about looking at the skills and gifts that already exist and where can we tap in there. Suzanne's talking about maybe a newsletter, maybe some programming to help us determine what kind of roles might we need for a project. I love this intention, Mikonis, who's saying it really does depend on the need. Sometimes you ask for help, see who shows, and then go ask people to step up when they're able to. So all of these make good sense. And we're going to go through a couple of things for you to consider as you're thinking about building a team that will be supporting a mutual aid project that will hopefully last beyond a few weeks, beyond a few years, hopefully last, my hope is generations. So if we go to the next slide. One of the first places that we want to begin, and we talked a little bit about this last time, is to really be clear on what you're up to. And at the core of it, what are the values and political commitments that you are choosing to make with your community? And this really helps to shape and define what kinds of roles you will have. So some questions that you could ask yourself is, what are some of the values that guide this project? Is this a project that really rests on interdependence? Or maybe a project that is committed to ending criminalization and is really grounded in abolition? What kinds of feminist practices are also essential to the ways that you choose to work? We like to start here because our values often guide how we operate, how we move collectively together. And they can also be a place of accountability for us to assess, how are we doing? How are we showing up, building our team and treating one another as we're working together? The next thing that we want to take a look at is, and we can actually go skip. Yeah, thanks, Tamika. We can skip to the next one. Yes. Is really clarifying what is it that needs to get done. So this particular category really helps you to discern what are some of the roles that you need immediately and what are some of the roles that you might need long-term. And we'll talk about this later, that not all roles need to be fulfilled right here, right now, depending on what's needed, depending on the commitments that you've made with community, that, and also depending on what needs to get done, will impact when people come in and what people will do. Some roles also might need to be held by one person, and some might need to be held by multiple people. And so clarifying the what that needs to happen also helps you to discern who needs to be holding what. The next piece, so after you have firmed down on your values, clarified what you're going to be doing, what needs to get done, then we look into the nitty gritty of the tasks themselves. So, what are the high level categories of work that needs to happen? So, one of the mutual aid projects that I'm connected to here in New York that's supporting migrants and protecting them from ICE, some of the categories of work that we look at is around how do we cultivate our vision and political clarity? What are the logistics and operations of our work? What kinds of relationship building do we need to have to support how people are coming into the project and also expanding our reach throughout the boroughs in New York? There's also categories around safety and how we are resourcing and evaluating our work. So these are some examples to think of. And for my folks who are really into the details like I am, you might take these categories and then break them down into subcategories. So for instance, safety, you could break down into safety for mobilizations, safety inside of coalition meetings. For logistics and operations, maybe you have a breakdown there of budget operations, space, things like that. And I think, not even I think, I know the more clear you're able to get, the more proactive you are in really discerning and determining what kinds of roles that you need when, and making sure that you're not overextending the people that you have or causing burnout that happens too soon. Okay. So you figured out tasks, you figured out what it is you need to get done. The next thing that to consider, and actually before we do that, what are some essential roles? So we just gave a couple of categories. I'm curious, for the work that you all are doing, what are some essential roles that feel important in the mutual aid work that you either are currently doing or you hope to do? What are some essential roles? All right, Susan, yes, somebody who can work on social media, digital literacy, try saying that 5 times fast, is really, really important these days because of how much communication and also how much community building is happening online. What else? What else are folks considering in terms of essential roles in the work that y'all are doing? And I'm going to look over here in the chat. Yes, Daria, you asked such a really great question. So when starting out, is it necessary to get all of these questions answered? I was thinking to experiment with a few things and see what gets a positive response. No, there's going to be a lot of questions that we're going to be offering to you. And really, we want you to be able to discern and answer the questions that allow for you to have a strong foundation to begin. So for some people in this room, you might be able to answer all of the questions. For some, there are questions that you want to prioritize that helps you build up your project to the scale that's necessary. Also build up your projects that in a way that really meets the integrity and the needs of your community. And being able to do that project in a way that is sustainable for you. So we'll talk about sustainability in a little bit too. So let's keep moving and keep dropping essential roles that you consider in your projects, because they might be something that other people learn from in this room. There might be roles that people are not thinking of that they might borrow from some of the things that you consider. So in addition to what needs to get done and the specific tasks that need to happen, it's also really important to get clear on what are the key capacities and competencies that you will need. So it's not just about the work that needs to happen, but what are the skills necessary to be able to do these tasks well. So for instance, you might need somebody who is really detail oriented that can hold down logistics in a way that will support short and long-term labor. For For people who, actually, I would say this for all projects, because mutual aid projects are fundamentally about relationships. You need folks who have a particular set of emotional skills or political skills to be able to navigate the current landscape that we're in. And that's really important because not everybody who has a particular skill, they might do a skill really, really well, but not necessarily have either the emotional maturity or the capacity to be able to do that particular skill for the long run. So in addition to the tasks, it's really important that we're also considering what kind of capacity does it take to do this role well? So maybe that might mean this role requires this amount of time, or it requires this level of emotional, physical, or spiritual competency. And then, in addition to that, we also want to look towards our circle. So as we look at the things that need to get done, the specific tasks, the competencies and capacities, we look inwards to see, what do we currently have? Yeah. Like, what are the roles and people that currently exist that can meet these particular needs? Excuse me. And it's not enough to say, just because somebody knows how to do a particular skill does not mean they want to. And it also doesn't mean that they have the capacity to. So the last question here is really important. Like, is this a role that a person can easily take on? Is this a role that is joyful and aligned with somebody's skills, capacity, and competence? And can they, I think a question that I would add there is like, can they do this particular role as long as the role is needed? And depending on how you answer that question, it might mean that you need additional support for that role, or that person might have to look at other roles to be able to support in the ways that they can. So yeah, starting with who's already there, who can hold down what, and that also helps to illuminate what you might need, like what some of the gaps are in the circle. And if we go to the next slide, thanks, Tamika. This is really fundamental. So oftentimes our excitement and our longing for making change can have us moving too fast too soon and growing our projects much, much bigger than they can sustain themselves. And starting small and then expanding from there is really, really essential, because you get to learn a lot about the rhythms, the relationships in a group, and then figure out where might you need to shift to be able to coordinate well together. Most of the mutual aid projects that I've seen that have fissured and fallen apart within 6 months to a year often do that because they have grown too fast and too big, or they only have a few amount of people doing the most work, and there isn't clear communication, clear decision-making, clear process around them. And oftentimes what ends up happening is people start leaving, conflicts start breaking out, and the work is not as clear or as impactful as it can be. So some questions that you can ask yourself are, what roles are really essential right now? What can emerge later or rotate? What's the minimum structure that you need to begin? And see if you can sustain that for 6 months to a year and then grow from there. And then really thinking about, how often do you want to assess the capacity that's needed to do the work well, and also the roles that are needed to hold the work with integrity. Yeah, so start small and then expand from there. There's always some level of room for some kind of expansion. Thanks, Tamika. I want to offer another framework that we use a lot at the Building Movement Project. It's called the Social Change Ecosystem Map, and it was created by my amazing comrade, Deepa Iyer. I'm also going to drop the link here, socialchangemap.com. It's another framework that really supports groups in assessing and clarifying their roles, thinking about what's the quality and the kind of ecosystem that's necessary for us to make our values real and also sustain our roles, as well as offering 10 different kinds of roles that are often played inside of social change ecosystems. And it's a beautiful guide. There's a book that accompanies this map, and it can help you to really get clear not only about the roles that you have, but also how those roles can function and collaborate together. So shout out to Deepa. I know some of you already use the map in your work. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Katina to talk about some best practices.
Hello, can you all hear me? Greetings, greetings, greetings. My name is Katina Parker, and I'm the founder and steward of Feed Durham. We have fed approximately 200,000 people from my front yard over the last 5 years through a variety of organizing tactics. It includes cooking for folks and mostly gathering resources from local vendors, from major distributors, and essentially shifting resources from people who have to people who need. I personally come from a long line of mutual aid practitioners. I come from a mutual aid network that is over 100 years old, based in Oklahoma. And that network was single-handedly responsible for integrating the state, which is the case in general for the civil rights movement. A lot of times people don't understand that mutual aid is actually what made the wins of the civil rights movement here in the US possible. And it's what makes any sort of socio-political wins at the grassroots level possible. The relationships that undergird that work, and then the resources that we offer to one another as an extension of those relationships. So, here in Durham, where I'm based, we are, Durham is known around the world as an organizing, center, and we're known for certain interventions. But like many places, we are in a space of shift and breakdown. New mutual aid groups that sprang up during COVID, during shutdown, are shifting, being challenged. And I do some consult, I do some interventions, for those folks. And so I'm going to offer some best practices based on things I have seen in the field. And I welcome you all also to drop your ideas about best practices and agreements into the chat as we go. But first, I want to say this. There's some distinctions between mutual aid work that is done in rural communities and mutual aid work that is done in urban communities. So in rural communities, people tend to know one another for very long times. Their families tend to go back a long way, sometimes many generations. And in rural communities, the type of mutual aid projects that come about come about based on a general understanding that a resource is lacking. And the most common thing, especially with the corporatization of our healthcare systems, are the lack of healthcare spaces in rural communities. You have to drive like really, really far, right? And so when those interventions are developed, it is after years of conversation and struggle, and there's a mutual aid intervention that comes oftentimes because a new resource is available to answer that need, right? In urban spaces, where there's anonymity, where people are erased, where people are invisibilized, I find that mutual aid functions differently. There are the networks that already exist in those communities, and every one of our urban communities have like long-standing mutual aid networks. And then there are layers of network, many of them new, that form each time another set of people migrate to a city. And people tend to migrate to cities in waves. So that said, I'm going to read through some best practices, and we'll be sharing those with you. I wrote some things for you all. It says mutual aid is broadly defined as relationship-based community organizing with the shared goal of collective liberation, right? So when it comes to identifying a need, especially if you're a new person in a new community, I personally am not a fan of new people coming into a community and just starting things, because what I've seen happen is that people start things and it's less about serving the community and more about getting to know people, like getting to know neighbors. But also, more importantly for them, it's about realizing power together. And And it's important to recognize that distinction, because what tends to happen is we perpetuate charity models where we gravitate towards people who are like-minded and shut out the people who think differently and who are going to challenge us. And then we maintain the status quo. It's one of the ways that we find ourselves in this sort of political environment that we're in now. Show up, slow down, and listen. Again, if you're new to an area, before starting a mutual aid project, one of the things I recommend is that you consider joining a pre-existing entity led by people who look like the community they serve. So I'm always leery of any sort of project, but especially a new mutual aid project that is led by white folks and primarily serves Black and brown folks. That power structure never works, never works, never works. And one of the reasons I'm wary also is, within our communities as Black and brown folks, we have a way of reinforcing social boundaries that white folks don't necessarily understand. And so some of the breakdown that I see in the mutual aid space right now is around white-led organizations who didn't do that work in concert with Black elders, with brown elders, to learn how conflict resolution is extended in the community. And now they find themselves in many conflicts and they don't have the skill set or the background or the support to navigate them. And, and they're also teetering on burnout because of all the other things, right? Like, so if you pour into a group, if you become involved in a group that's established, you basically learn the lay of the land, and you get to intern, if you will, within the community and figure out like what is actually missing. And then you can make an informed offering to the community with the support of the community, in concert with the community. Sustainability. The communities that I came from did not suffer burnout. Doesn't mean people didn't get tired, but we were so interconnected, but also so self-sustaining because it was rural, that there wasn't a whole lot of burnout. Not around mutual aid. There was burnout around, suffering through racism and through classism and all the other isms. But we understood that our destinies were intertwined. And the more we understand that as communities, as a movement, the more we pour into one another as community and hopefully suffer, less burnout. I can say more about that at another time. Mutual aid for me is a spiritual practice. And I encourage that amongst, all my friends and all of our volunteers. It's not something that you just schedule on a weekend. It's a personal practice. It's how you dial in acts of kindness and thoughtfulness just in your daily comings and goings. So it's whether you cook extra food for a neighbor, whether you set aside your kids' clothes for someone who really needs the help. But mutual aid is also reciprocal. It's not just sending out resources. You should receive something back. And most of all, for me, it's self-learning, it's self-study. So in doing the work of mutual aid, I'm always asking myself who I hope to become. And when things get hard, and they will get hard, people's personalities are difficult. We're going through difficult times. Folks are dysregulated. It's going to get hard. But when things get hard, I always ask myself, what is it that I'm growing? What seeds did I plant? What am I nurturing in myself? What am I nurturing in my community? And then that really shifts my perspective on the difficulty that I'm experiencing and allows me to approach it from a place of hardiness and from a place of solution making. I recommend that you journal about your journey. 5 years ago when I started Feed Durham, I was decidedly introverted, in part because of shutdown. Like I went into shutdown. And so there was definitely a lot of internal conflict around like having hundreds and hundreds of people come through my yard and work every, few weeks or every few days. But I really love the person that I've become as a result of the work. I'm more patient. I'm more resourceful. I'm funnier than I used to be. I know all kinds of weird things because of people's like niche interests, and I really appreciate like that knowledge comes in handy in my day-to-day life. So I feel much stronger because I've poured into community in some unprecedented ways. I have received it back like many, 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 many times over. So journal about your journey, and consider sharing those journal entries, with family and friends, as a personal testimony of your own growth, and to encourage them to get involved in community work, because to survive and thrive during what's coming, we have to activate people who are currently not activated. Many of us are already overworking, and so we got to get more people who are doing less, doing more. And coming to the end of mine, prioritize personal growth. Growth is not easy. Erica Badu used to say, if you want something to grow, threaten its roots. And so I find it's important, especially for white folks who are submitting themselves to Black leadership, to really like learn the difference between discomfort and being attacked. You know, like straight, direct communication is not necessarily an attack. You know, sometimes it's just the most efficient way to get the message across. And we only have so much time to get the message across in this current environment. So really study your sensitivities. You know, I'm pretty direct about these things. In the work that we do, I encounter a lot of tiny white hands, and tiny white hands meaning like being accustomed to comfort, being accustomed to leisure, you know, being accustomed to being able to opt in and opt out. For what's coming, we have to opt in fully to community. And there's some hardinesses that we have to grow in place of those discomforts. So please be open to it. Position yourself to learn hard lessons. Manage your expectations. We are all imperfect beings working towards a better world despite our personal traumas and baggage and biases. We're going to hurt one another. We're also going to heal. When possible, I try not to personalize the harm, and I try to widen back to understand the circumstances that facilitated that harm so that I can problem solve. Because ultimately, for me, it's less about my feelings and more about being able to problem solve. And because I've been able to shift more towards that focus, it's really improved my own personal emotional regulation, which is something that we are each going to have to master during these like intensifying times. And lastly, accountability and repair. I'm somebody, I don't want your apology unless there's behavior change behind and around it. Otherwise, you can keep it to yourself. And when you're working in hard hit communities, they're not interested in your apologies. They're not interested in your out processing about why you did. I don't care. I don't care. Whatever it is that we said we were going to do, that's what I'm focused on. It's not that I don't care about you. You know, it's about understanding when you're making the work about yourself in a way that detracts from the support that other people need. And it's not to say that you shouldn't be tended to, but that might not be the moment. So I say repair. Accountability requires repair. When you know that you've harmed someone, especially someone who you were taught is less than you, take that as an opportunity to repair the damage that racism and classism have done to your spirit. Tend to yourself. You know, do that deep tissue work so that you can free yourself. And when you're in a position to offer behavior change, offer an apology. Be ready to make repairs. Accountability always comes with repair. Show up with ideas about what you can offer to repair, but also be open to ideas about what you can do to make those repairs. But I don't recommend that. A lot of times, you know, people who are apologetic but aren't really apologetic will show up and say, well, what can I do? And really they're just looking for the get out of jail free card. Don't be that person, because ultimately this work is about our own like spiritual progress and personal evolution. We're doing it so that we can become better versions of ourselves. We cannot take shortcuts at this time. Like the shortcuts put us in the position that we're in now. So we really have to do the deep tissue work. That's all I got.
Hey, Katina, Carissa, you're on mute.
Thank you, Tamika. I was saying thank you, Tamika. Thank you, Adaku. Thank you, Katina. I always get so much wisdom from listening to you all. And I was just reflecting, you know, as I prepared to speak. So Adaku talked about building your mutual aid project, and Katina gave us some best practices. I'm going to introduce myself for those who weren't here last year, and then talk about some key roles from a real mutual aid, another mutual aid project. I'm Carissa Vaughn. I am a co-founder of the Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund, along with Tamika, who's also a co-founder. Mama Fund, Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund, also known as Mama Fund, is a mutual aid fund and a time bank. We're based in Atlanta. We're a Black-led mutual aid fund. We started in 2020 at the onset of COVID, so we're a little bit over 5 years old. We started as a rapid response mutual aid fund. We raised about almost $1 million and redistributed it through like Cash Apps and Zelles and checks. And that was our rapid response to urgent needs when people were losing their jobs or locked in. And then we started a time bank, which we're building out right now. So I'm going to talk about some of the sample key roles from Mama Fund. I did jot down a couple of questions from the chat and a couple of points that I wanted to address that Adaku and Katina brought up. I really like Katina's best practice of kind of looking to see who's doing the work. A lot of times we are reinventing the wheel, or a lot of times the mutual aid project will fizz out because we're trying to do too much alone. And there's already a team, there's already lessons learned, and there's something that we can join and reinforce. So about Mama Fund, we started with about 10 to 12 volunteers. Some of us knew each other, some of us didn't. I talked about this last week, so I won't go too much into detail about that. As far as how we developed key roles and got started, we started by establishing our values. We started thinking about what it was that we were trying to do, why we were trying to do it, and how we would figure out if we were doing what we said we were going to do. As I said, we started as a rapid response mutual aid fund, and some of the work that kind of came up as we were discussing how we were going to operate were finance and fundraising, membership and partnerships, application creation and review, program admins, and a time bank membership and organizer. I'll briefly go through some of those because some of them are kind of self-explanatory. And if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat. Oh, something. So we raised almost $1 million, and we did that mostly through small donations. So our finance and fundraising committee was really all hands on deck at first. Everybody was kind of helping with creating a fundraising campaign. Most of those donations came from small donors. There were neighbor to neighbor donations of like less than $30. We had a solidarity committee form who would get their friends to donate larger amounts of money. We did some small grants and some larger grants. So it was really pulling resources from various sources and then just redistributing them. We had, as Tamika mentioned, we're fiscally sponsored by the Organization of Human Rights and Democracy. One of our founding members came to the collective with their organization, and we chose to use that infrastructure just to be more efficient and just to move things a bit faster. Other duties that the Finance and Fundraising Committee were responsible for were just verifying payments, touching base with people who had trouble with payments, answering questions, verifying contact information, accounting, kind of basic finance and fundraising things. Our membership and partnership working group was really about political education and partnering with local or value-aligned coalitions, kind of finding out what else is going on in the community. How can we partner? How can we disrupt? What are your practices? What are our practices? How will we build together in the future? We had a couple of people who were really good with digital security and data management. One practice that we had was to minimize the data that we collected. We really had no reason to traumatize people and ask them for all of this information. We also didn't want to hold information. We wanted people to trust us. We wanted to be transparent about what we were doing with the information that we had. So while we used it to kind of guide our work, we didn't collect it and just hold it. Let's see. we all started as volunteers, and we were working crazy hours per week. I mean, crazy hours. And a lot of us had other jobs and children, but we were really dedicated to the cause. And then we hired a couple of program admins who really, they've been with us for some years now, and they really have their hands in everything. In addition to being one of the co-founders, I'm also the Time Bank membership and organizer. So after a few years of focusing on monetary mutual aid, we started the second phase of our time bank. Our time bank was always part of our plan, but we wanted to start with the rapid response mutual aid first. And then, I skipped over application creation and review. So one thing that Adaku mentioned was that, you don't have to have, you may have some roles that aren't needed immediately, or you may have multiple people in roles, or you may have roles that kind of come and go. At the beginning of our formation, we did spend a lot of time creating a low barrier application for people to give the bare minimum amount of information and get their funds quickly. And then we had an application review where we reviewed thousands of applications. We talked about time banking. We understood people's stories who wanted to share those with us. And we just continued to communicate with them. We did some phone banking. We were virtual because we started during the lockdown, but we were still able to communicate with our people. We also had political education. We had a webinar, and we really just, as a collective, tried to make sure that we were doing what we said we were going to do. I'm going to talk about some common challenges and troubleshooting, and you'll hear a little bit more about how Mama Fund was developed at that time.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Carissa. Thank you, Katina, for just giving more examples, concrete examples of your experiences with your mutual aid projects. And shout out to everybody that's dropping their own examples in the chat. This is a community of practice together where we get to learn from one another around how you are thinking about your work. What are some of the things that you've tried on? What are some challenges? So please keep sharing as you are able to. So we're going to talk a little bit now about sustainability, safety, and boundaries. And this is just going to be a slice. There's so much to cover around each of these. And we want to invite you into some considerations, some possible practices to really support you in sustaining yourselves, your teams, and your projects for the long haul. And if we go to the next slide, I just want to normalize that we are living inside of imperialistic, fascistic conditions where there is so much isolation from one another. So even thinking about sustainability is really, really difficult. There's a lot of risks to us moving towards sustainability. There's a lot of risks to even being alive. And we know that care in so many different ways is being criminalized. From the ways that there's increased surveillance and state repression. I think about the ways that people who are trying to get aid to Gaza right now are being punished and policed for doing that, or folks, like some folks in this room that are trying to protect their neighbors from ICE are also being punished and criminalized. Oftentimes we don't have enough resources to do all of the incredible work that we have to do, or sometimes the resources that we have go really fast because our communities have so much need. Sometimes the risk that tends to bubble up is the risk in our relationships because of how tender and torn our relationships have become and how separated we are from each other. And of course, many of us are very, very tender people who are empathetic and taking in so much of what's happening in the world, and it is impacting us vicariously. So there are many, many risks to sustainability, and it also doesn't mean that it's not possible. And what I think it invites us to do and to think about or to consider is how might it be possible, even with the risks that are involved. And hopefully being more clear about the risks can help us to be clear about what kinds of strategies that we can lean on to support our sustainability. So notice even on this list, like which of these risks are showing up for you right now, which are impacting your capacity to sustain yourself or the work that you're doing. This is not a comprehensive list, so feel free to drop in the chat, like what are some of the other risks that you are contending with that is impacting the sustainability of your precious self, the people that you're doing work with, and also the mutual aid project that you're either doing or considering. If we go to the next slide, when we talk about sustainability, we're going to be looking at it through 4 core fractals. So personal sustainability for ourselves, relational sustainability between folks that you are connected to and working with, material sustainability that's really looking at what are the conditions that are supporting the sustenance of our work, and then politically, how might who we are, the work that we do, survive within the political landscape that we are in. So as I'm going through each of these core areas, just notice for yourself which area feels really strong, which could use a little bit more support, and which questions might you want to linger in a little bit more so that you can support the sustainability in this particular area. So let's go to the first one. So personal, yeah. What are some of the things that supports you in being alive as a person, as you on your own terms? Again, all of these lists are not comprehensive. These are some things that tend to come up. Our capacity to rest and to nourish ourselves through sleep, the rhythm of our work, so the pace, our capacity to be able to rotate who does what work, and when we're able to say yes and no, the quality of our boundaries and how we're able to follow through on them, our capacity to be able to notice early warning signs that the ways that we're moving are not in alignment with our care, and also our capacity to be able to develop really clear exit strategies when we need to shift our approach, how long we stay, or how we do the work so that we can live one, and we can also keep doing the work with integrity. For some people, personal sustainability might be how you are in your joy, how you connect, how you hold ritual, whether it's with other people or with other species, to support you in holding on to the meaning of life, the sanctity, the majesty. My Niger accent is coming out now. The majesty of life, and what's most important as we move through this wild, chaotic, and humbling world. So some questions to ask yourself around personal sustainability are: what are some ways that you currently care for your physical, emotional, spiritual needs? What are some early warning signs that you are overextending? For some people, you might not even know what overextension is because it's become so familiar. And we'll talk in a little bit about what are some ways to pay attention to your body, to notice the distinctions between when you feel sustainable and when you are moving close to the edge, or maybe you've crossed the edge a little or a lot. Joy often helps to resource our sustainability. So really thinking about what brings you joy and what helps you stay connected to not only your values, but your community and the work that you're doing. In the resource list that we're going to give you, we'll share a number of different tools and guides and frameworks that can support your personal sustainability. But for now, we're going to be inviting just some curious questions to be with and consider to support each of these buckets of sustainability. So we have personal sustainability, Now, relational. So in this fractal, what we're looking at here is what's the quality of relationship between people who are choosing to move towards a shared purpose together. So how's your communication, the agreements that you've made? Are folks clear about their roles and what they're doing? And um, relational sustainability also includes our capacity to be inside of generative conflicts that can build more connection rather than produce rupture. Relational sustainability also looks like the ways that we're able to see each other clearly outside of the scope of a white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalistic lens and celebrate who we are, not just what we do. And so, some questions that we can ask ourselves around relational sustainability to help to grow it inside of our mutual aid projects. If we go to the next slide. What are some of the ways that you and your group communicate about capacity and needs right now, and what might need to shift so that the ways that you communicate are more sincere and much more real? What agreements would help you all work together more smoothly? Some people like to create agreements or invitations that they revisit over and over again as a source of accountability to really assess how are we together and what might we need to shift to be in better relationship with one another. And then a big one that I can imagine a number of folks in this room might have been with: conflict is inevitable. How might we be more proactive in thinking about when disagreements arise, how will we navigate it together? When tensions arise, how will we navigate it together? Whether it's getting conflict mediation support, whether it is choosing nonviolent communication when we talk to each other, or maybe it is figuring out a process that allows for anybody who's in a disagreement to be really heard and seen. So some questions there for y'all. The next bucket of sustainability is around material sustainability. So these are things like funding, the kinds of supplies that we need for our project, the infrastructure, the legal support, any kind of care supplies, things as minutia as like a first aid kit to mental health resources and childcare that you might need for your team. We're listing all of these things out not to invite you to have all of them, but to consider, in order for you and your people and your project to be as sustained as possible, what might you need in each of these categories? And these are just some examples. So for the people, my overachievers in the building who are like, I don't have any of this, or I only have 2 of these things, all good. So start where you are and you can always grow from there. And the beauty of being part of a network like Women's March is that the things that you don't have, you can ask for it inside of this community and circle, and hopefully get connected there. And I see some people already practicing that in the chat. Some questions that you can ask yourself around material sustainability is, what resources do you need to continue to do this work well? What are ways that you currently get funded and get supplies, and how might that need to shift? And what would support in making your work safer, more efficient, more effective for you and the community that is connected to the work? The last bucket of sustainability is political sustainability. So here we're looking at our security practices. Somebody mentioned digital security earlier. That's something that's so crucial, especially in this age where there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation, hacking of our tools and our information, that we are considering what kinds of security measures, whether technological or within our homes and organizations, that can keep us safer from surveillance and from the state. Some groups might want to think about risk assessment, whether it's understanding what kinds of political conditions you're facing or what kinds of risks you can afford to take in this particular moment. For some people, political sustainability might look like the ways that you continually deepen your political analysis so that you are clear about what's happening in your community and also connected to broader movements that are interconnected with the work that you do. I really love this last one around courage. And a lot of times, this work will produce a lot of fear. A lot of times, this work can produce a lot of despair. And there is a myth that you cannot act if you feel fear or feel despair or you feel rage. And actually, action can come with all of those things. The quality of the action you take might look different, but it's actually possible to still hold courage while you're afraid. It is possible to have despair and still move towards connection. And I think one of the lies that we're being told, particularly by imperialism and patriarchy, is that when we, in our despair, that we turn only inwards and look at ourselves, look after ourselves, and not allow ourselves to be held by community or reconnects with community in a way that supports our belonging. So if that's you here, I want to invite you back into us, into community, and bring your fear and your uncertainty with you, because that is one of the most human things that you can feel in this moment. Questions to ask yourself. What are ways that you and your crew might assess risk and manage risk? What helps you stay connected to why this work matters, especially what helps you stay connected when fear is present, when despair is present, when you're uncertain? What helps you stay connected? Or maybe who helps you stay connected? Maybe it's a spiritual practice. Maybe it's your child. Maybe it's your heart. And then, how do we support each other in the presence of these things as well, even as increasing threats happen? So, again, think for yourself. We can go to the next slide. Of all of these categories, which one is strong for you? Which one feels missing? What support would really help you in resourcing or fortifying these areas of sustainability? So personal, relational, material, political. And go ahead and drop it into the chat. And I want to encourage you, you can use the chat as an opportunity to ask each other some questions around, or make some offers around each of these things. Some of you might have resources around material sustainability or political or any of the other ones that might be helpful for the rest of the folks here. And again, we'll send you even more resources for each of these in an email. So let's go to the next slide. Boundaries. Many of us, I would go as far as to say all of us, are people who care deeply. You would not be on this call if you do not care beyond yourself. And sometimes the ways that we have been taught to care has us overextending, forgetting ourselves. Sometimes the way that we care, sometimes the way that we've been taught to care has us being performative around our care, trying to be saviors. And sometimes the quality of our care has us creating harm when there can be more healing instead. And so one practice that can help us in really titrating and offering care in ways that are much more sincere is boundaries, setting boundaries. And some of you might be experts here. Some of you might be like, I'm still learning. I'm one of those people. And we'll talk through a couple of tools, some resources, and some considerations around setting boundaries. So when we talk about boundaries, we are saying that boundaries are an expression of what you need to feel safer, respected, and well in relationship, whether that's with yourself, others, and the world. Boundaries are what help create the conditions where all of us can show up more authentically, sustainably, and with integrity. And boundaries, like sustainability, can be really difficult because of what we've been taught about boundaries. Maybe our boundaries have not been respected in the past. Maybe our boundaries have been taken away. And like we said around sustainability, boundaries are also something that we can keep. It's a muscle that we can grow with practice. So how do you assess your boundaries? So we'll talk about how you assess your boundaries and also how you might assess your group's boundaries. If we go to the next slide. So we often begin with the body. I mean, the body is what we have, and just want to honor that all of us have different relationships with our bodies. For some of us, our bodies are louder than others. For some of us, our bodies feel like home than others. And even right now, there's something that your body is letting you know about your yes and your no, and what might feel possible. It could be in the way that you're choosing to sit, the quality of your breath, the pace of your heartbeat, your sensations in your toes and in other places. And some questions you can ask yourself when someone asks something of you, what do you notice in your body? If your body is choosing to speak to you, then. So, do you feel contraction? Do you feel tightness? Maybe there's heat or numbness somewhere. And then, how do you listen to or override those cues? Our bodies are constantly giving us cues all the time, and we may or may not choose to listen. The next slide. Listen to resentment or exhaustion. Oftentimes, when those two things show up, it is sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes a signal that a boundary has been crossed somewhere. So, some questions you can ask is, are there places where you have felt that you've been taken for granted? Did you say yes when you actually wanted to say no? Where are you giving from? Are you giving from a place of obligation, or are you giving from a place of longing or desire? And even though you might not be able to tap into sensations, perhaps your emotional terrain is a place that you can access. And two really good places that can share more about boundaries is the quality of your resentment and your exhaustion as well. All of us have received messages about what boundaries we get to have and what boundaries we don't get to have. And most of the time, we need to unpack not only where those come from, but what those messages are still telling us about the kinds of boundaries we get to practice. So you might reflect on what you learned from family, school, and culture. Were you somebody who was praised for self-sacrifice? Were you punished or shamed for setting limits? Some of these experiences or relationships with community in different ways or institutions shape the way that we're able to express or even express our boundaries and also support other people in expressing their own boundaries. We can go to the next slide. And then we can hold our boundaries, how we assess them, through so many different lenses. And we want to invite you to hold them through a lens of value, yes, for you, and also around collective care. So boundaries don't necessarily have to be an expression of isolation. They can be a pathway to belonging and honest connection. And so we can get curious about, we can ask ourselves, what do we need to stay grounded, more open, and be in integrity with our mutual aid projects? What helps you show up in a way in this work where you feel proud? And how do the limits that you offer, how do they also invite other people to move up in their leadership and also hold space in the circle? Awesome. We can go to the next slide. The chat is popping. So good. I'm going to come over to y'all in a second. So for sometimes it's really hard to find the language to express the boundaries you want to have. And here's some sample language that you can use. Some of these were offered to me by my mentor, Lena Hara. And here's some language for setting boundaries with care. So I can't do that right now, but here's what I can offer. I want to help, but I need to rest to show up fully later. I'm at capacity this week, but I can help plan for next week. I need to move back from this role, but I can help train someone else. So a couple of language offerings there that you can use. And then for the next slide, these are some language that you can use if you need for asking for support, which some of us might have some difficulty in doing. So I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling afraid and could use help with blank. Can someone else take the lead on this while I rest or while I do this other task? I need someone to check in with me about blank. Could we brainstorm together about how we handle whatever challenge? Yeah, so some language for folks who might need some support with forming the words around boundaries. So it's not just us in a group, there's also other folks that we're working with. How might we assess our group's boundaries together? And here are a couple of things to consider. So we want to invite you to really check in about what's the consent culture rather than the agreement culture in your group. Sometimes groups can acquiesce to a false sense of harmony, and just saying yes because everybody is saying yes, but we can ask and take a look at the group to see, do people feel comfortable saying no? Can people counter offer? What's the quality of consent in a group? The other thing that we can look to in a group is, we go to the next slide. Energy and the quality of engagement in a group. So are there certain folks who have a pattern of saying yes, particularly at a cost of their well-being? Are others disengaged because they don't feel safe or clear about their role? Another assessment question that you can ask is, what roles or expectations or patterns are creating more exhaustion, avoidance, or resentment, either within you or within the group? So that's another bucket. Checking out the consent culture and then also tracking the energy and engagement. And then you can also take a look at the ways that people are choosing to communicate, and what kinds of boundaries people have around their time. So are people texting and emailing each other at all hours of the night? And sometimes groups have agreed to do that. And if so, people are consenting to that, that's fine. And if not, then things need to be shifted or addressed. Do meetings go over time consistently? Is there a shared understanding of when we're able to stop or pause communication? We can look collectively at how is the group's rhythm, and are there ways that you all are moving together that's overriding what people can actually do? Okay. The next thing to look at is invisible labor and emotional boundaries. So who is holding the emotional labor? Are there ways that particularly caregivers, parents, people who are taking care of elders, folks who are disabled are being asked to stretch beyond what's sustainable? And pay attention to the patterns of what labor gets acknowledged and what gets avoided, what gets punished. Helping to visibilize the labor can also help to honor the labor that it takes for the work to be done well, and make sure that that labor has enough support. Another invitation here is around what we choose to practice together. Like, what are some sustainability practices or boundary setting practices? And here are a few. I love the red, yellow, green light check-in practice where we invite people to say green, like naming what's in alignment, or showing green a paper or like color. Yellow is for articulating what feels unclear or feels tender, and a red is a no or a boundary. Also, we talked about community invitations or collective invitations that allow for people to really integrate some level of pause or stretch or move back when needed to shift their capacity. Awesome. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Carissa to talk about common challenges and some troubleshooting around those challenges.
Thank you, Adaku. I just invite you to reflect on all of the things Adaku is saying. Again, I was reflecting on them from my experience in mutual aid, and some of the things that they were talking about kind of came up as if they came up or afterwards, and there were things that I wish I had reflected on earlier. So those are super helpful. Before I talk about common challenges and troubleshooting, I saw some really interesting questions in the chat that I wanted to talk about. I think, well, I'll read the first one. It says, can you please explain how shifting resources from people who have to people who don't is mutual aid? Based on last week's training, it's more like charity. This is an important question because a lot of people aren't familiar with the term mutual aid, even if it's a practice that they have, even if it's a practice of cooperation and collaboration. So I think we can have several different answers for this, but one of them is mutual aid and shifting resources. When we talk about shifting resources, it's not just money, it's not just material wealth. So if you are a person who's shifting money, who's shifting material wealth, you are getting something back. It may not be money, it may not be material wealth, but the well-being of your neighbor is valuable to you. It should be valuable to you. The destruction of systems that exploit people and neglect people and destroy people is something that you are receiving. And often people who have less wealth are the catalysts for these type of movements. Often these movements are built on their backs. Wealth shifting includes culture and storytelling, all kinds of kind of untouchable things that exist and reinforce humanity and connection. So kind of think about it like that. Even invisible or underpaid labor or unpaid labor, care work, we're all benefiting from this. So when we talk about shifting resources, not just cash, it's not just skills, it's not even just time, our energy and our lives, our health, our well-being. When we think about mutual aid, we have to think about community, collectives, and interconnectedness. So I wanted to talk about that because when we think about it like that, it helps us enter into mutual aid spaces in a different way. And we can carry that with us as we do our work. Some of the other questions I'll kind of address as we're going. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I mentioned that Mama Fund started with a bunch of volunteers and we formalized our organization, but mutual aid starts in all types of ways. It can be organic and spontaneous, like friends sharing labor to redistribute something, or friends sharing knowledge to navigate the healthcare system, or a situation in their neighborhood or in their family, or friends sharing excess material resources. We've all experienced, having something to share or receiving something. So these are forms of mutual aid when we intentionally practice them. They kind of come up unexpectedly, but we make sure that we're the type of people who connect in that way. They can also be intentional but informal. So maybe you have something a bit more scaled than individual exchanges, like organizing a meal train after a family has lost someone or moved to a new home or had a baby, clothes swaps, free stores, study groups, care work, shared living spaces or meeting spaces, or pooling of other resources. Think about what type of informal or organic or spontaneous mutual aid projects that you've been involved in, or mutual aid exchanges or cooperatives that you've been in, and you can share some with each other. Formations can be collaborative. So maybe you have a core group, but you rely on other groups for communication or a driver or legal help, accounting. So you have partnerships with other organizations. And I think somebody, I don't see the question, but I think somebody mentioned that somewhere in the chat. And then complex mutual aid. Yeah, there it is. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to actually talk about that specifically in a minute. So complex mutual aid projects may incorporate as a legal entity or use a fiscal sponsor. So as I stated earlier, a Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund has a fiscal sponsor, the Organization of Human Rights and Democracy. And because we handle such large amounts of money, it is necessary for us. It's necessary for accounting and taxes and all the stuff that I don't deal with. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So when you are putting together your mutual aid project, here are some of the questions that you can think about. What is this mutual aid project disrupting? When Mama Fund started, nobody knew what was going on. We just knew that people were losing their income. People were already, in strained situations. There were no stimulus checks. We just didn't know how people were going to get help. And we know that people who have less money feel a weighted burden. So we wanted people to feel like I don't have to go through a lot to get help. Think about your mutual aid project. Is it ongoing? Is it crisis related? Is it temporary? Is it crisis related and ongoing? Mama Fund started in a crisis, but we knew that we needed to sustain. We didn't know when the pandemic was going to end, but our plan was to continue going, and we have been able to do so. Some mutual aid projects are going to be temporary, and they're planned that way. Sometimes they're seasonal, or sometimes they're regional, or just for their disaster relief or some type of situation. And the organizers plan for it to end. That's okay. Are there security, legal, accounting needs that should be outsourced? And this is kind of related to the question that was just highlighted a minute ago. Thank you. How are an organization's assets owned, managed, and how's legal risk managed? If you share food in a tent collapses and hurts someone, who's liable? So I'll say once, twice, and 3 times, I'm not giving legal advice. But these are definitely conversations that we have had, especially in time banking. There are organizations out there with movement lawyers that you can seek out. I'll drop some in our resource list afterwards. These conversations are happening. They're not something that you have to figure out on your own. They're not something that you have to reinvent. And there's support for these. There are waivers, there are lawyers that can give you the tools that you need in this mutual aid framework. So that's a really good question. And we always go back to the question, is someone already doing this work or related work? That question, even though we start there, before we even start a mutual aid project, we continue there because there's always an opportunity for collaboration, partnership, lessons learned, reinforcement, harm reduction, or if you do decide that you're going to end your mutual aid project, maybe you have resources to share with another or vice versa. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So one of the first things that we thought about in Mama Fund after, forming is how are we going to make decisions? We chose a consensus-based decision-making model where everyone's ideas and flags could be discussed. So sometimes the conversations were a little lengthy. And I'm a curious person who loves to ask questions, who loves to uproot things in conversation. And I love to hear and observe what other people are thinking. These types of conversation, I'm going to quote Tamika. Tamika used to always say, make space, take space. And it just stuck in my head. So these conversations allow for that. These conversations invite and encourage everybody to share their perspective, to share their lived experience, to share voices from outside of the room. And it's really important that we do that, because a lot of the mutual aid projects, we need to amplify the voices of the directly impacted. And a lot of times we have a certain privilege that just doesn't afford us the insight, and sometimes not even the sensitivity that other people's experiences would provide to the group. So even though there are a few challenges with consensus-based decision. One of those is just everybody might not be available. People may need to communicate in a different way. Maybe people aren't available for the meeting, or maybe people need to email or text or phone call, or a decision is kind of put off and put off again. It is still more inclusive. It also makes us identify power dynamics. Power dynamics can be related to race, class, gender, identities, relationships, and access. And some of that will be uprooted through conversations. We try to resist hierarchies, and we try to make sure that people are kind of on the same accord and understand that everybody's experience is important. Although we do center the most vulnerable, that doesn't mean everybody's experience isn't as important. It means that once we address the most vulnerable, everybody's needs are going to be addressed. Can we go to the next slide, please? I think there was another question. Okay. So skills share and development. I got what it takes, and it takes what I got. I was listening to some song on the radio, and that the singer said that. I said, yeah, that's fitting. Everybody has something to offer, something to learn, and something to teach. Really be creative when you're thinking about what skills you have. They might be soft skills, bringing people together, making people laugh, comforting people in their time of grief, listening, asking questions, answering questions, being a great facilitator, being insightful, sharing your travel experiences. So we're not just looking at hard skills. Hard skills are of course important too, but everybody has something to offer. We don't want to just rely on professional standards, because they often leave people out. Often people feel like, well, I don't use this language, I don't have this skill, I don't have this training, I never learned how to do this. And they kind of sit on their hands because they're not encouraged or invited, and they're kind of discouraged from participating. So it's just really important to be creative and think openly about what are your skills, what are other people's skills, how can we create a comfortable environment for people to share. One tool that we use is an offers and needs market. In little bitty type, you'll see that an offers and needs market is a tool created by the Post-Growth Institute. Let me know if you've ever heard of one of these, or if you've ever participated in one. And I'm looking at a question. So an offers and needs market is a guided exercise where community members come together, some strangers, some friends, and they really start asking themselves kind of like guiding questions. The first guiding questions are, what are my strengths? What am I good at? What can I talk about all day? What do my friends ask me for help with? And we can start kind of thinking about and writing down and sharing with each other what those strengths and gifts are. These are things that we may offer to our community. After that, after we go through several rounds of that, the next round is getting more vulnerable. Where do I feel challenged? What do I need help with? What kind of brings me discomfort? Where do I want to stretch and learn? What do I want to accomplish, but I need the help of other people? and we kind of go through rounds and start writing down and thinking about, how we can help each other. In these conversations, I'm saying this because I've experienced it time and time again. People really start getting to know each other. People really start understanding that I'm more empowered than I thought I was. I have more to offer than I thought I did. I'm more connected to my neighbors than I thought I was. So these conversations have been eye-opening to me and to a lot of our participants. And I recommend it in your organization, among your family, among your friends, just as a way to kind of reflect on some of the gifts that we have and some of the needs that we have. And can we go to the next slide, please? So accountability to community. This is where we start and this is where we end. Mutual aid projects are not just about giving out resources or sharing skills. They're really about disrupting root causes and building alternative structures. So as we are building a time bank, we chose time banking because it's something long-term, it's something sustainable, and it depends on relationships. Whatever you're rebuilding, try to avoid using processes that are based on exploitation, that deny people dignity, that deny people benefits, that deny people rights, that are biased and that are discriminatory. This building mutual aid projects that are built on a false sense of security, there's abundance, there's plenty for everybody, but this false sense of scarcity is disproportionately assigned to certain populations and privilege is assigned to other populations. And we need to rethink that. We need to destroy that. How do we do this? We establish frameworks and grounding values together as a collective, and then we check ourselves again and again and again and again. Are we following these values? Are we partnering with others who follow these values? Can we go to the next slide, please? So here are some examples of Mama Fund's values, and a few of them, they're listed on our website, and I just brought a few here for an example, and then I'm going to answer a question in the chat. May I ask if the slide is made a little bit bigger, please, if that's possible? If not, that's okay. Thank you so much. So one of our grounding principles, this fund is grounded in principles of mutual aid and collective responsibility, not charity. The vision, work, and distribution of funds is driven by the needs of community, not by donors. So we are taking care of ourselves. We are saying what we need. We are demanding of our rights. We are not going to, follow corporate rules and donor rules that make us feel bad. We are utilizing a wealth redistribution framework, which means moving funds from those with accumulated wealth to those who historically have been left out of process. We recommend, now this last one, we started during COVID. We recommend that employers utilize their wealth to offer workers PTO, sick leave, hazard pay, workers' comp, health benefits, etc., prior to giving donations to this fund. So this one, I mean, we can still use this today, but back when COVID started, a lot of people were still required to report to work, even when there were COVID cases, even when people were getting sick, even when people weren't wearing masks or didn't have masks, there were certain populations still required to come to work. When I say certain populations, we talked about this last week. A lot of the workers who had higher education, maybe they were in a position where they could work from home or they didn't have to come to work, but a lot of the lower wage workers were required to come to work. Someone asked, this is going to come up a little bit later, but can you speak to collaborating with groups who may not be 100% value aligned? E.g., churches do stuff for local communities, but tend to be pretty patriarchal. I'm naming that because when we established our values and we started thinking about coalitions and partnerships, we also started thinking about political education for ourselves, for our extended communities, for coalitions and partners who approached us. And we had to choose when, how, and if we wanted to do the labor to have those type of conversations. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but I did want to name that was something that came up in very early conversations. Can we go to the next slide? Here's an example. This is not a real chart. It's a sample chart. One of our members, Javen, made a very, very detailed chart for making sure that that funders who gave us resources were value aligned. And this is not it. This is just a sample. So here the question is this a large donation from a prominent person or corporation? If the donation is small, we might accept the donation. If it was a donation from a prominent person or a corporation and it was a large donation, then we might ask, no, not we might, this just is a sample, so I'm trying to be careful with my language. Does this donor intentionally harm communities? If yes, we turn down the donation. If no, we might ask another question. Are we required to collect and share details or photos of our recipients? If the answer was no, we can accept the donation. If the answer is yes, we would turn down the donation. Again, this is a very overly simplified example of a detailed flow chart we have, but you'll see there in yellow, there's set up a conversation. Obviously, situations are not so black and white. So there were times where we knew that we weren't 100% aligned in values with organizations, but they wanted to learn, they wanted to help. And so that was part of our political education. So to answer your question, we might set up a conversation. We might ask each other, do we have the capacity for that conversation? It might be an email, it might be a Zoom meeting, it might be an ongoing relationship, and we kind of build from there or see what happens from there. I think I'm running out of time, so I'll wrap it up. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you so much. Is joy in the room with us? Capacity building, rest, and support. Adaku did such a beautiful job talking about this. Mutual aid projects, I don't even like to use the word project, practices and lifestyles, they're such a beautiful thing. This is just part of my family life. Before I before I became part of Mama Fun, before Mama Fun became Mama Fun, it's something I learned from my grandmothers and aunts and cousins and mother and sisters and brothers, just cooperation, collaboration, my neighbors. And it has just contributed to the well-being of the people in my life, especially me. So prioritize the well-being of your collective. Collaborate. I think you probably have all heard many hands make light work. Let's make things easier on each other. Let's not put the burden on one person, but it's important to incorporate rest, healing, and joy in your work. In my work, we had processes to give out money. We had timelines and schedules and working groups, but there was often an emergency request in the middle of the night, 10 emergency requests in the middle of 10 nights. And it can become traumatizing to just try to respond, or you can't respond, or you're trying to figure out and navigate this new process. And it's important to acknowledge that and talk about it. So in the work that you do, I'm sure that you have or will, come across these types of situations as well. Acknowledge grief. We're not always talking about happy times. A lot of times we aren't talking about happy times. So, do something to release that from your body, whether Adaku gave a lot of great suggestions, and celebrate your people, celebrate your community, celebrate your plans, and celebrate your accomplishments, and celebrate the fact that you are practicing with other collaborators and cooperators and carers. And I will leave you with that.
Thank you so much, Carissa. Thank you, Adaku. Thank you so much to Katina, who had to hop, but of course is always offering amazing stuff. I'm gonna do this last little bit for us, okay? We're going to do a little bit of reflection and a little bit of recap, and some invitations. And I do want to also make an offering to build off of Carissa's last slide, to build off of some of what both Katina and Adaku brought. Women's March, if you go to our YouTube, we have done a number of amazing videos, and so there's all these things that you can lean into and that you can access. To this question around accessing grief, to this question around being in your body, to this question around finding joy, I encourage you to find some of our Healing Justice videos that are on our YouTube channel. Adaku has joined us for some Healing Justice sessions, and we have amazing meditations, restorative yoga practices, etc., etc., etc. I encourage you to get into it, to do it with your group. They are an offering to all of you, an offering to the movement from us. So I encourage you to do that. All right, that was an aside. We're gonna get into these takeaways and the invitation for what's next. So first things first, we talked about our key steps in building your project. We talked about roles that you might need in your project and how to identify those roles and some examples of what that might be. We talked about how to think about sustainability for yourselves and for your organizations, your formations. We talked about safety, boundaries, people. We talked about, Carissa walked us through some common challenges and how to troubleshoot some of those challenges. And so, of course, we will have some of those resources and tools will be given to you, sent to you in a follow-up email. So I encourage you to look out for that on tomorrow. But guess what, y'all? This is not it, okay? The training is not the end. So first things first, I want you to check out your email tomorrow. If you registered for this training, check out the email. Look in your email tomorrow. This video will live on our YouTube channel. It will also live on our Facebook. And I didn't even recognize that we were also streaming on Twitter tonight. So it will, or X, whatever you want to call it, and it will live there as well. And so please watch all the videos. Watch the videos. Get into it. Go back to it. Revisit it. But this is not it. We want you all to actually, we want to continue to walk you through and support you in not just starting a project, but sustaining a project. And so what we are up to, the 4 organizations that have come together for this initiative, is building a network of feminist mutual aid projects. Okay. So 1, you will get an email tomorrow that will have the link to the video, that will have a link to the slideshow, and some other resources and information. 2, if you registered for any part of this, you will receive a toolkit that has some of the tools and helps you walk through the beginnings of building out your project. So the community mapping tool, Adaku walked through last time, some of the key steps tool for today, some of all of that, you will get in the toolkit in the next week. We also want you to think about, if you have an existing project, 2, you're interested in building a project, or even if you are like, I still need more information, I'm not sure yet. But I would love to be in a space where I can ask questions and I can explore together with other folks building projects. We want all of you, okay? We want you to be in this network with us. And so I am dropping a link in the chat to a survey. We would love for you all to fill out. You will also get this survey in your email tomorrow. Please, the invitation is that you fill out the form and you tell us, 1, what you thought of this training, because our plan right now is to re-up this and to continue to train people and train people and train people, because yes, we want people to be doing mutual aid in their communities, but we also know we have to build to scale. Okay, so we want to be building as many mutual aid projects as is necessary to respond to the needs in our community. So please fill out the form, the survey. Tell us how this training went. Tell us what we need to tweak about it, but also tell us about your project and tell us if you want to be involved in a broader network, and if you want to be involved in getting flanked and supported, if you want to join us for office hours to help you with your, ask questions, if you want to get peer support inside of a digital space. That is what we are building, a long-term ongoing project that includes monthly office hours, that includes a digital space for peers, that includes being able to list your mutual aid project on the Women's March map as a local group so that people can find you and get involved, and also be able to use that Women's March infrastructure, digital infrastructure, to organize your folks together. So this is the offering that we're making. So please fill out the survey so that we can get in touch with you and we can build out this network and we can grow as many feminist mutual aid projects and connect as many feminist mutual aid projects and help you sustain them for the long haul. All right. So please do that. Fill that out. And then I just have some final announcements for y'all from the Women's March team. One, again, check your email tomorrow. Okay, by end of day tomorrow, you will get an email from us. Shout out to Risa, who's on the back end, who's our digital organizer, who is making things shake and making sure you all get emails on the other side of this. If you did not register for this program, but you want that email and you want that toolkit, email us at organizing@womensmarch.com. That is organizing@womensmarch.com. Okay, shoot us a message so that we can make sure that you get all the tools and resources. All right. Now, things coming up. Yo, for those of you who've been around us for a while, we know we are getting into our programming bag. We are trying to build this feminist force against fascism. Okay, so we have lots of offerings for you, opportunities for you to take action, opportunities for you to learn. So on Thursday, please join us for an impeachment town hall alongside Free Speech for the People and Representative Al Green, who has filed articles of impeachment. We want to talk about what is happening with the fight towards impeachment, how you can get involved, how you can take action, how you can push your congressperson to fight for impeachment, because there has never been a stronger case to impeach a president than there is right now. Okay, so that is on Thursday. Then next Tuesday, we are back in the building for a mass organizing call alongside our friends at In Our Names Network. It will be a mass organizing call on gender and police violence. If you joined us last July, you might remember we also had another call with In Our Names Network to talk about the murder of Sonia Massey. This month marked the 1-year anniversary of the murder of Sonia Massey and the 10-year anniversary of the murder of Sandra Bland. So we will be talking about gender and police violence next Tuesday. And then the following week, we're going to talk about a mobilization. I know a lot of y'all come to us because you want to march, you want to be in the streets, and there's opportunity to be in the streets. On August 12th, we're going to talk about our next mass mobilization, which I'm going to come back to. It's the last thing on this list. I'm going to come back to and tell you about what that mobilization is. On the 28th, we will have our next Digital Defenders call. So if you are interested in learning about how to make interventions on the internet, inside of your networks around misinformation and disinformation, how to be on this sort of feminist cyber force, fighting against misinformation and disinformation and fighting really against attacks on feminism online, join us for Digital Defenders on August 28th. On the 26th, that previous Tuesday, we will have our first in a series of calls, a monthly series that will be called Reading the Revolution. If you are a fan of books, every month we will be talking about a different genre of books. And we'll be getting into the fandoms. If you are a fan of books, if you are a fan of a writer, if you are a fan of a genre, we're trying to talk to you. Come join us. Let's talk about how we can organize within our fandoms, our book fandoms. Okay. In August, the summer is winding down. Many of you have been to the beach and you have brought your little romance novels to the beach with you to read for the summer. That's what we're up to on August 26th. Reading the Revolution, Session 1, Summer of Smut. Let's get into it. Let's talk about romance novels in the context of feminism. All right. And then lastly on this list is our next mass mobilization in partnership with our good friends at 350.org, in partnership with a number of different climate organizations. We will be in New York City, September 20th, and across the country during UN Climate Week for Make Billionaires Pay mass march and national mobilization. So those are the things that are coming up. So many things. Please stay tuned on our socials, on our website. Come join us. You can always find our link in bio on all the various sites. You can find the sign up for everything on our website. Come kick it with us. So many opportunities to get involved. So many opportunities to build your political understanding. So many opportunities to build your leadership. Also, just come kick it with us. We gonna have a good time for the rest of the year, right? And we're going to be building and we're going to be fighting. So with that, I want to offer a couple things. One, in the chat, I would love for you all to drop one insight that you are taking with you and one thing that you are sitting with as we end this call. And as you are doing that, I want to make an offering. Adaku closed us out with a beautiful poem last week. And this week, I am going to close us out with one of my very favorite excerpts, and one of my very favorite quotes that is very much that I quote. If you came to the Free America Study sessions, you probably heard me say this multiple times, or a piece of this. But Arundhati Roy wrote an essay called War Talk, and in it she says our strategy should be not only to confront empire, but to lay siege to it, to deprive it of oxygen, to shame it, to mock it with our art, our music, our literature, our stubbornness, our joy, our brilliance, our sheer relentlessness, and our ability to tell our own stories. Stories that are different from the ones we're being brainwashed to believe. The corporate revolution will collapse if we refuse to buy what they are selling. Their ideas, their version of history, their wars, their weapons, their notion of inevitability. Remember this. We be many and they be few. They need us more than we need them. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. Thank you all so very much for joining us for these 2 sessions. Please do, I'm dropping the survey link once again. Please do fill out the survey. If you want to get the toolkit, if you want to get the resources and you did not register, that is okay. Email us at organizing@womensmarch.com. We are looking forward to continue to build the infrastructure our communities need to survive and to thrive and to defeat fascism. So please keep rocking with us. Y'all have a wonderful, wonderful night.